What did COVID-19 do to the art? In 2020, it eventually became clear that to limit deaths, we would all need to avoid contact with each other. With every individual in a semi-quarantine, many businesses had to cease immediately. No galleries, theatres, concerts. If you wanted to enjoy the outside world for a while, you had to rely on vicarious experiences through a device. For the dramatic shift that it was, it feels to me like everyone forgot the lockdown as soon as they could after it ended. I struggle to see any major ways it has affected our lives since. So I thought maybe if I examined the works of art directly related to COVID, it would be easier to notice these themes in the future. To me at least, it feels like recognizing any lasting impact COVID lockdowns did to our culture would go some way to justifying what we suffered through. So, let me see what I can observe about the art made while we were all inside. Bo Burnham's Inside is the most literal and entertaining time capsule of the COVID lockdown. In it, a man, already vulnerable from worsening mental illness, tries to be creative while stuck in a single room. Day after day comes without seeing anyone or any sign of the isolation ending. The creative process of finishing his Netflix music special and all the rest of the future stretches out in front of him as tangled and uncertain. His only inspiration is what he's allowed to do on a daily basis. Video calls, surfing the internet, and reflecting on his own downward spiral. The frequent switching or merging of tragedy and comedy make Inside an excellent reflection of being scared and unsure if optimism is appropriate. He needs to make something fun and creative when everything is telling him that nothing is funny about what is happening. Yes, the only news is bad news, but does that mean comedy is unwanted and we should all be sharing only in our misery? These thoughts might give a comedian an existential crisis if their purpose is suddenly being questioned. Jokes and music can feel frivolous when everyone is just trying to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. It's hard to know what is appropriate when everyone talking and everyone listening knows that life has changed. What are the rules of engagement in this new world? Can I make a joke, or will that make everyone angry? Thankfully, through Bo Burnham creating a work that questioned its own necessity, audiences could realise that laughing at their situation was exactly what they needed. Now, Bo Burnham proved that much could be achieved alone in a room, but he was not the only musician staying creative, and some were using music to reach out from their loneliness. In lockdowns, we still had unlimited remote interaction over screens. You can't go to a concert, but you can watch a live stream and interact by typing through a chat window. You're interacting directly at almost the same time, even if you aren't in the same place. In the words of Bon Jovi, when you can't do what you do what you can. And one particular example of people doing what they can in Mexico was the rapid growth and popularity of Huapango live streaming. Musical performances shared over live video with online communities built entirely over social media. Huapango music and dance is a traditional culture with a long history, and live streams had also existed before the pandemic, but suddenly, online was exactly what everyone had to rely on to interact with people. During lockdown, singers would improvise new lyrics relating to the pandemic. These realities of life were suddenly forced into our culture. To ignore the reason everyone was watching would be disingenuous, like not acknowledging the elephant in the room. The only comfortable atmosphere had to come from expressing what everyone was thinking by the way of songs. These new lyrics would include advice on staying safe, regional news, or that most human of responses to a crisis, jokes. And, as it has always done, music acts as the ceremony around which social gatherings are based, even if it's a pale imitation of the in-person equivalent. A mind that yearns for live music won't settle for another existing popular entertainment, but seeks out the closest equivalent to the actual passion. Trapping a mind is a long way from sedating it, and the lockdowns could not simply freeze people and their minds in place. After some time in lockdown, COVID cases were going down, and rules were written to help everyone start coming back into the real world. Then there were, in fact, COVID-era art exhibitions you could physically go to. For example, 2021, the Stephen Bugler Gallery held an exhibition. Imagine the joy and relief of finally being able to go out and appreciate a crafted experience in a public place. But if the attendants weren't at least a bit apprehensive, maybe they hadn't stopped to consider what pandemic life had changed in the artists and exhibition spaces. Now, you can never ignore how art is mediated if you want to consider the effect it had, so here's what attending the exhibition was like. Online booking, highly recommended. You await the date. You drive or walk there through near empty streets of a once bustling city. Wait for your entry in a socially distanced line where everyone has masks. Present photo ID and proof of vaccination. Get temperature checked. Then, finally, you can, among other exhibitions, find Max Steen's itinerant photo booth. A photo booth run by animatronic figures. All this effort to go outside to an event that gets you somewhat around people, and you walk into a scenario where people that would be there are replaced by uncanny models. Dead staring eyes, limbs and props that are trying a little too hard to pose naturally. This day out doesn't feel like an escape from the pandemic, it's just an extension of the awful sinking feeling you get from seeing streets empty like the rapture just happened. Is this life now? You've either walked into a scaled-up doll's house or some near future where weird robots are everywhere and everyone but you has learned not to get completely creeped out by it. Hope you enjoyed the exhibition as you travel directly back to your isolation. Escapism can be very useful, but this was clearly not the place to go to if you wanted to avoid the truth. Still, at least people were trying to hold in-person events. Clawing towards normality is admirable, even if reality is impossible to ignore. But sooner or later, you must return to the inside. So let's take a look at an experience about going outside while everyone is staying inside. Death Stranding is a game that presents a world where the outside has been abandoned for being unsafe, just like the streets and workplaces of a lockdown. In its vast world, you play a courier, delivering packages to people you never see. Ostensibly, your work is essential for humanity's survival, but everyone is isolated, and your interactions are with machines or remote communication. It feels like an allegory for the lonely delivery driver, where the importance of their work forbids them from ever seeing anyone. But this is misleading. It shocked me to realise that Death Stranding was fully developed and released before any COVID lockdowns. How did this experience encapsulate the next year of events so correctly? The foresight is almost suspicious. Hey, says Death Stranding developer Hideo Kojima, wouldn't it be weird if everyone had to isolate to protect themselves from disaster, so the only people walking around would be equally isolated delivery workers? Yes, it would, Hideo. Speak up, I can't hear you under my tinfoil hat. No, it's not a conspiracy. Good naturalistic art, even if the grounded world has fantastical elements, feels real because it takes observations of how society exists today, and how humans responded to tragedy in the past, to hold up a mirror and let us see ourselves for how we are. Of course we would use technology and delivery drivers to completely isolate ourselves and live our lives from home. That kind of thing was happening before it was unsafe to go outside. All COVID did was cause us to lean on elements of life that already existed. The scale and nature of the pandemic was unprecedented, but maybe life during the pandemic was just the logical extreme of the way humans have been living recently, brought into reality by an extreme situation. Presently, we're no stranger to isolation, and historically, humanity is no stranger to extreme situations. Speaking to Screen International, Belfast director Kenneth Branagh spoke of how lockdown reminded him of his childhood in Belfast, staying inside to hide from the Protestant Catholic gang violence. That was his first lockdown. What Branagh found in the feedback to Belfast was the feeling of living through a crisis was relatable, even if the stakes and scale of the crises we've lived through are different. There is the fact of the pandemic, the time, place, procedures, technology, and then there's the feeling. The feeling of knowing that stepping outside and walking down the street just got more dangerous, and not knowing if life can ever return to what it was before. A tipping point. Can you feel time shifting beneath your feet? How will you react? Are you prepared? How will you change? Will you be ready to emerge from the rubble when called upon? You don't know. You hope so. Here is the essence of what I think of as COVID art. In the immediate moment, there is isolation and loneliness. If you do your best to interact remotely, the barriers surrounding you are palpable and the conversation can never ignore the changes you're all getting used to. You see that warnings and rules are part of the public consciousness now. You might see comedy used to underline the tragic and absurd situation. When you sit to think long term, you might wonder if life has changed forever. Our awkward, struggling attempts to make things like they were before feel off, disoriented. What I hear from artists is this: I'm sad. Are you sad? It's scary. I hope we'll be alright. These are the emotions that defined the era. The message of COVID art is amplified if you're also living through a crisis. Or if you lived through COVID, maybe it will have a profound effect on lockdown babies when something life-changing happens to them. After all, some of that art made during the era will persist to be experienced later on. Much of art is remote by the nature of the medium. It is created, then later it is seen. In the distance you can hear "Are you okay?" being called from a very specific space and time when the world was trying to recover. I hope it all worked out for them. If you enjoyed me talking about the musical comedy of Bo Burnham, you'll enjoy my previous video about different kinds of comedy music and how we can define them. Thank you for watching.